Hello, everybody, and give me a second. Let me mute this computer. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the NewbieDM show. It's a new show for me. First of all, I want to thank you all for joining me, those of you watching live, and those of you who are watching on VOD in the future. Thank you for joining me on this show. This is a special show for me. I've been thinking a lot about what to do on video. Where do I want to take this whole video thing? And I thought maybe doing a show where I interview people would be an interesting thing. I like talking to people, so why not? And your show is only as good as your first guest, right? And so I figured I'd start with two of the best, knock two good shows out in one. Joining me tonight on this debut of the NewbieDM show are two legends in the D&D industry, the RPG industry in general, Mr. Ed Greenwood and Mr. Jeff Grubb. Ed, Jeff, thank you for joining me. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing real well. Yeah. Thank you for having us on.
This is great for me. I'm geeking out because you guys are, I'm a big fan of you guys. I'm big fans of your work from days gone by. So just for me, I'm geeking out here, and I want to thank you for joining me, and I'm going to get straight to it. I don't want to spend a lot of time saying hi to each other. We did that for half an hour before we started the show. So, Ed Greenwood, creator of the Forgotten Realms. You designed a world. The world is still being played today. It's a world that's retained its popularity for 40 years or so. We know how it started. We've all heard the stories. You started writing articles for Dragon Magazine, and a gentleman by the name of Jeff Grubb was sent a big box of material, and they told him, "Here, we got to publish this. Turn it into a world." Want to give me a little bit of give us a little bit of insights into how this went down, Ed and Jeff. You jump in whenever you feel you need to.
Oh boy.
Well,
Okay,
go ahead, Ed.
so
start with your Dragon Magazine.
10 years. Oh, start there. Okay.
Well,
yeah,
everyone.
because the realm started 10 years earlier when I was.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you.
I was
let's
writing
do this.
stories just to entertain myself as a little kid. Yeah.
I know you started with Dragon Magazine issue number 30. So let's talk about that. How do we get there?
Okay. Okay. So to get there, I start reading Dragon with issue 7 in the local Toronto gaming store, and I am by then reintroduced to D&D for the second time. And we're starting to play D&D. We're also playing other things like a box set game from TSR called Divine Right, which came out about in those days, and it had two things wrong with it: an unfinished rule that stopped in mid-sentence, and a different number of counters for one country on the punch-out sheet than in the rules. So I wrote errata or fix-its for how we played it, and I sent them off to Dragon, and they saved it for a theme issue, which was Dragon 34. And in Dragon, and then I noticed they had restarted Featured Creature as a thing called Dragon's Bestiary, which at the bottom said, "Hey, you get paid $25 for every monster here, and everything on these pages is as official as anything published in the Monster Manual." So I wrote up a monster, the Cursed, for Dragon 30, and sent it off, and they published it.
A crawling hand, if I remember.
And I wrote a second one, the crawling claw for Dragon 32.
Right.
I mailed it off. This is how long ago this is. Snail mail. There's no internet. I mailed it off. 16 days later, my copy of Dragon came to me with my monster in it. And I said, they're desperate! And I sat down at my father's old Underwood, and I banged out monsters, 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 and sent them off. And I also wrote something that was near and dear to my heart, the Gates article, which was editorially titled "From the City of Brass to Dead Orc Pass in One Small Step." I just called it Gates in D&D. And I sent it off, and that got me a phone call from Kim Mohan to the library where I work saying, "Are you coming to Gen Con this year?" And I said, I am now. And he said, "Good, I want to talk to you." And he offered me a post of contributing editor. And I said, what does that mean? What do I get paid? He goes, that's the contributing part. And he had been impressed with his background in journalism that he'd received an article, the first Dragon article, that had footnotes in it. This might have been an error in judgment on his part, but he made me a contributing editor, and I think he was delighted because it meant that he could assign stuff. Like, he could be an editor like in journalism, where if you have a piece of art or you have a theme or you have a topic and you need something of a certain length written in a hurry, because the issue would grow or shrink by 8 pages depending on the ads coming in for that issue. He had finally had somebody he could like sort of contact to do stuff more or less to order, and that's how the Wizards 3 articles started. They were like the ecology of series that actually came from a defunct magazine called Dragon Lords, and they had about 6 of them. And he said, hey, you want to do this? And here are the monsters we'd like you to start with. So that's how I started. And because I was a shy retiring Canadian, I know it's hard to believe, shy and retiring, I felt it was incredibly gauche to start an article saying, hi, my name's Ed Greenwood, you never heard of me, but here's a better way of rolling dice than you've ever thought of, you schmucks. I just thought that was not a good authorial voice. So, and I knew that every player read every issue of the magazine as well as Dungeon Masters, if they could get their hands on it. So I didn't want to say, in the second room of the ruined castle, there are 8 orcs and their hit points are X, Y, Z. I wanted to say, it's rumored that there are orcs. I wanted an unreliable narrator. So Elminster stepped into the pages of my articles, and I would say, it's rumored, and I would mention the realms, because I could use it as a way of illustration, an example. And Jeff Grubb noticed this.
Oh, there's a bit of a story behind that,
Over
too.
to Jeff.
Literally, we had started building worlds with Dragonlance. And believe it or not, at the end of after the first year it came out, it was becoming very successful. And our company was saying, okay, what next? I mean, we have a story, we have an epic, but what happens after that? Do we have anything else that we want to do? And I'm the poor schmuck who basically said, Ed's been writing all these articles and mentioning all of the stuff about, this area called the Forgotten Realms. Maybe does he have anything there? And as a result, they said, you call him up, see if he's willing to sell it to us. And I go, okay. And I call him up, and he got the library, and basically say we're interested in buying your world. And basically, you've been running. Do you have a campaign? Have you been writing stuff down? Is there material? Oh yes, I've been running a campaign for quite some time. And it's just, it's the adventures, it's the company of crazed venturers, it's Golden Fields, there's activity in Waterdeep and in Shadowdale, but then we've generated some material. That's great. We'd like to buy it from you, and we'd like to develop it further. And he said, well, since you've published a lot of this in Dragon Magazine, I thought you already owned it. And my response was, I'm not going to tell anybody you said that. We'd like to buy it from you. And we purchased it for a small amount of money, a computer without a hard drive. We gave you a hard drive in the second year because everything was working so well.
You bartered for the Forgotten Realms?
And a promise to publish.
I'll give you a sack of flour for your world.
Yes,
So,
I've got these magic beans. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
And promise of writing novels.
So let me ask you a question, Ed. So you get this call from Jeff Grubb, right? And I'm going to assume you're about 30 years old back then. You're a 30-year-old dungeon master, running games in your world, and the company that publishes Dungeons and Dragons calls you and tells you, we want to buy your world. Do you suddenly feel like the king of the nerds? Are you like, wow, I'm the king of the dungeon masters. They want to buy my world.
No.
No?
No.
Why?
I just felt, oh, good. I'm going to get color maps that don't have pencil crayon marks in them. Yes. No, I wasn't thinking of King of anything. I was just thinking, oh, this is going to be wonderful. Ah! And so I said yes.
Ed, how long was your campaign going before we bought it? How long were you playing D&D with your gang?
I started playing D&D in 75.
Okay.
And we said, this is cool, but it's just going to devolve into an argument. At that point, there were just the 3 booklets, Greyhawk
right.
and Blackmoor and Eldritch Wizardry hadn't come out yet.
Right.
So there was no thief. There was no, it was like, this is a cool storytelling idea. It's just going to devolve into an argument.
Okay.
But by the time the player's handbook was brand new and published, so Jack Vance's magic system mated to the monster manual that had already come out, I said, okay, I'm changing everything in the realms, which was a story world up until then. I was writing stories from it. This is going to be my hidden armature, my network of bones, to keep me honest as an author and make everything hang together, because they've done it for me. And we started playing D&D steadily, the home realm campaign, in 1978, and it's continued ever since.
Wow.
How did your gaming
these
group,
days it's like once a year.
How did your gaming group react to the fact that TSR was going to publish the world that we're playing in? That must have been mind-blowing for them as players, you know?
Are we going to get paid for this? Yeah, you get you have to sign this release form and you get paid one American dollar. And if you don't agree to that, we don't use your character. Oh, okay. So they signed all the release forms, and I just threw them in one of the FedEx packages. They never got the dollar from TSR. They got it from me.
I don't remember the dollar,
because,
so that
hey, I have these American dollars. Yeah.
I'll send some out.
So I covered it. It's all right.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
Give me a purchase order. I can basically reimburse, but I'll buy you pizza.
So let's talk about the process.
Oh, cool.
From the point you send your material to TSR, and Jeff, you get all this material and you start building this.
Oh,
this
no. It's not a big box.
No.
It
was
weekly FedEx packages.
And this is the days before the internet.
Go ahead.
So everything was FedEx. It was FedEx to make sure it gets from Canada to Wisconsin, because shipping things by post, parcel post, and everything would have a tendency to maybe hang up at the border for quite some time. We both have stories of that. So Federal Express was our mechanism.
One package still on the way.
Yeah, and he would basically pull together his notes and what he's written on, and this was stuff that was typewritten. This was not stuff that was basically in any. And you did put it into computer files eventually, and I would get this large package, Federal Express, that was filled with paper that basically was like wrapped 17 times. There would be like it'd be in the package, and then you'd open it up, and there'd be some brown paper, and you'd open it up, and there'd be some this heavy Canadian cellophane that basically you could use to insulate your windows, and open that up, and then there'd be foil, and then you open that up, and there'd be another layer of paper. I mean, you keep digging it down.
Cardboards.
And I'd spend like 5 minutes ripping it across, and one of the editors on the other side of the cube wall is saying, "Another package from Ed, eh?" And yeah. And then when he sent discs, those would be wrapped in foil, and then wrapped in cellophane, and then wrapped in paper. I mean, he made sure this stuff was just as intact as possible. And early material, oh my goodness. One thing I mentioned is that at one point he was using a typewriter that the T key didn't work. So he drew in all the little T's after he finished a page, and it was like a little graveyard. And we had, and you would like have 1/8 of an inch margins, and right from the very top of the page to the bottom of the page. And if he didn't like something, he would sometimes cut it out and reassemble it. That was literally physical cut and paste. So this was like very rough notes area, and this became the foundation for the realms. He sent us his original photocopies of his original maps which were, he put them on, I think, 24 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And then we assembled them in the office, and is were those the original maps?
So
Those
is
are
Ed
photocopies.
sending you packages through FedEx
Yes.
because he's inventing the shit as he's going along because he sold his world and now he's got to deliver? Or is there so much content that he's got to send it out in waves?
Yes, he's sending me his content. He's sending me the material. Now, in the gray box, which was our first game product, you will see that a lot of the write-ups have like some information and then Elminster's notes. And the Elminster's notes are just about what he had sent us in that material. So we'll have some areas that have a lot of information, I
have a dog here.
What's the one on the east with the no problem.
Boromir had a lot.
Boromir had a
Sembia
lot.
had
Sembia
very
had
little.
nothing. Sembia
Yeah.
had nothing. Sembia was the place where evil merchants came from that the player characters could defraud. But further,
There was
Ramen?
one world that you were keeping open for the
Ramen?
RPGA.
Yeah, there was.
Oh, that was Raven's Bluff and the eastern
that-
side of the Vast.
Yeah, that was Raven's Bluff for that. And then further east, there was an area with the snow witches. The name is
Rashomon.
escaping me. Rashomon, there we go. And you had a large section on Rashomon, so there was a large section of Rashomon in the original box. Because we used what was there available. Sembia, we originally held out to be an area that we're not going to go into. Go play with that, and we're not going to mess with it. And that lasted about 3 years. But that was an area that, because primarily we had nothing on Sembia. We had a lot on Cormyr, we had a lot on Shadowdale, we had a lot on Waterdeep, we had a lot on Baldur's Gate, and basically fitting all the pieces together, working through the maps, and I have to admit this, we redrew parts of his map. Doug Niles had a half-finished novel that he was writing with TSR UK. It was going to do the British Dragonlance. And then they canceled the project. And he had a half-written novel. And we said, ooh, we can take that. And so we redrew the Moonshades, which were originally more like Archipelago, more like Earthsea, you always mention. And we basically just dropped it right into the realms. And that was the nature of the realms, is we could just, because it was such D&D, so D&D based, that we could basically put things in there that had been orphaned, that didn't have a place otherwise. Desert of Desolation, the H series, 10 Towns. All of those were areas that got added as we continued to develop the world.
Was there anything you had to leave out because, Ed, there's no way we're putting this in this product? Was there anything like that you could give us a little hint about?
No,
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yes.
I think Jeff was doing the censoring my adult language, but I don't think there were any
Brothels.
geographical areas
No.
that we left out.
No, there were no geographical areas that we basically put.
Oh.
Well, that we didn't redraw. But yes, that's the Fest Hall story. Ed had done all these maps of all of these towns of Shadowdale and of Arabelle and of Waterdeep, all of these towns, and he has the map key. And basically, okay, this is great. We can just type everything in, and we were ready to go. But some of the buildings were brothels, bordellos. I think there was a seraglio or two. And I'm afraid we can't do that. So my choice is either rekey the entire map or find something else to call these places. And that's where we came up with the idea of fest halls, which are, much like the way you portray them, is a place of enjoyment, of sating various desires, food, wine, song, company. And as a result, that has now entered into the language as a fest hall. So okay, that's our contribution to English.
So how much time passed between?
I recall.
Go ahead, Ed.
I was just going to say, I recall Jim Matkus at an early Gen Con explaining, fest halls, it's like that that hall that you rent in town for weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs.
Yes.
And somebody said, "Oh, okay," and
The
walked
banquet hall.
away.
It's like the
Yes.
horticulture hall in Lake Geneva where the
Yes,
first
the
Gen
banquet hall.
Con was. It's a
You're like,
public space. So
So how much time passes?
Okay.
How
Okay,
much
go ahead.
time passes between the FedEx packages and 1987 when the gray box is released? How much development time?
When did we first start working? Was it 86 or 85?
Uh,
I think it's 86.
June of '86. June of
Uh-huh.
'86 is my first
Right.
package.
Okay.
To you guys, and the fold-out freebie map in Dragon comes out, I think, in the very early fall. You know, the one that was stapled into the middle.
Right.
And then Doug Niles' novel is the first Realms release,
Right.
and
That's
I
next
think
year.
there's about 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That feels about right.
I think
We
it's
first
about
met
6 months, and then
physically at that Gen Con, at the Gen
Yeah.
Con. Well, literally, we're assembling the TSR booth. And I'm at like one end of a beam, and he's at the other end of a beam. And I say, "Oh, by the way, I'm Jeff Grubb." And he says, "Oh, really? I'm Ed Greenwood. We've been working together for the past 3 months." Okay.
Ed, do you have any input in that Doug Niles novel?
Yes. No.
in the novel
Eh.
directly, no. Just to say yes, that's fine if you sink my moon chase. And then I see the finished novel. You know, when it comes out, like a gamer. You know.
Oh, gosh.
I think
And
the only early
That was always a
editorial
problem,
in-
getting him stuff. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Because
I
why?
do know that when Bob Salvatore sent his first novel, The Crystal Shard, I actually got a typescript manuscript, and I don't mean typeset. I mean just as a photocopy of what came off Bob's typewriter. It certainly looked like a typewriter, not a computer. And the question was, is it okay if we use all these wizards? And I said, please don't use Grimwald, because I know that one of my players is working on that we will run at a Gen Con. And I'm sure that we'll build in an inconsistency, because Bob will say one thing about Grimwald and another thing will be said in the adventure. But aside from that, and I just threw another couple wizard names he could use instead. And as far as that, I know that was the only early editorial thing.
Gods.
Any of the fiction.
For the Dark
Yes.
Walker on Moonshae, we basically took the Shantia, we took Baal, we basically took a lot of your gods and said, and these are the gods of this operation. So that was operating at a very high level. But as far as Robin and the rest of the characters, those came out of Doug's head. Actually, interesting story. Crystal Shard was not when Bob first applied for basically said, I want to write a novel for you, and basically he wrote the first 50 pages of a sequel to the Dark Walker on Moonshae. And I reviewed it. And ran into Doug, and I said, Doug, I read your first draft, and it's a little different, but it's pretty good. And he just looked at me and says, I'm not writing a sequel yet. Okay. So I had to track down and find out that no, this came from a young man named Bob Salvatore, and basically, and we went back and said, the realms is big. You can take your own territory. You can basically create for a different area. I can do that. Yes, you can do that. And that's where, of course, Crystal Shard and Brunor and Dritz and all the rest of that area just sort of like evolved out of.
So, second edition D&D comes out, and obviously the Realms has to evolve with it. So this book comes out, Forgotten Realms Adventures. Both of you worked on this book. This happens to be one of my favorite books, by the way. I love this book. One of the things I love about this book is what you had to do to the assassin character class. And if you don't remember, I'll remind you, they basically all dropped dead in the fiction.
Yes.
The assassins in the world
Yes, they did.
dropped dead.
Yes, they did.
Can you talk a little bit about either how awesome that sounds or how ridiculous it sounds?
Got another Bob story. And Bob tells his story too, so I feel very comfortable with this. Basically,
Oh God, yes.
they decided we're going to go over to second edition, we're making some major changes. We're not going to talk about Cavaliers anymore. We're going to basically, change up all the spells and everything. And we've got, and we're going to get rid of assassins. And we got this great moment in the novel that they were planning of where all the assassins dropped it. And Bob, he's got a major character that's an assassin. Well, okay, you have to call Bob and tell him that he has to get rid of that character, and but he can kill him and he can get rid of him any way he wants. We're giving him the freedom of choice there, but you, Jeff, get the call. So I call up Bob, and I tell Bob, okay, here's the situation. We're getting rid of assassins. We're going to do it in a very, very epic way. Do you want to kill your assassin first? He said, let me call you back. And he hangs up, and then I expect there are some fervent phone calls between him and the book department between this, and then he calls back. And he says, Jeff, that character is not an assassin. Oh, really? He just kills people for money. Okay.
Got it.
and that's how we kept the character. So, I felt very good about that. It felt like a very, very logical solution, and I think that was brilliant. So yes, the world did change as we went from first edition to second edition. And we did it through the Time of Trolls. I was writing the comic book at the time, and we wrote that into the comic book as well. So that was actually I consider that book to be sort of like my endpoint. I've worked on a lot of stuff for TSR over the years, and I had a lot of people who have been excellent editors and designers who have picked up the tasks. But that was sort of my last major project, and so that sort of like closes the arc of that first couple years. It starts with Darkwalker and Moonshaper and ends with the Avatar trilogy.
Yeah, because I noticed you're not a part of the third edition Forgotten Realms. But at this point, you're still with Wizards of the Coast.
Not part of. Well,
So
I had worked for TSR. I left and went freelance. Worked for some other companies, including Margaret Weiss's group, and then rejoined everybody out in Seattle at Wizards of the Coast.
But not to work on Forgotten Realms.
I think Rich Baker was, basically running that one. So.
Got it.
But not working in the realms. I was working Star Wars. I was working D20 Modern. I did an adventure tied in with the D&D movie, which is a scary thing.
There's a new movie coming out.
Yeah.
Diablo.
I did a Diablo box set. Yeah, so I was kind of versatile. So.
Did you think D20?
Which is a cool thing. One of the great things about.
I'm going to go off topic real quick. Quick question.
Sure.
Did you think D20 was a good fit for Star Wars?
Yeah. Yes, I do. They picked up the system for Knights of the Old Republic as far as the mechanics for it for the computer game, and I liked actually basically taking that and adapting it to the Star Wars universe. The guy in charge of us, Bill Slavisek, was actually one of the designers at West End on Star Wars material. He was the guy who created, who named a lot of alien races like the Ithorians.
Yeah.
So basically, I think the sense of continuity there really helped as well.
Because that game had a lot of big shoes to fill following the West End games, D6 game. So.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. The West End game was excellent. So my wife still plays it.
So do I. So Ed, second edition D&D, Forgotten Realms. What's your favorite story of that era? What's your favorite Forgotten Realms story? Not fiction story,
or stories.
not a module, not a book, but your favorite story, like something that happened or a funny anecdote.
Oh, about working on the realms.
Yeah.
Well, that second edition is when I ruined 2 bedspreads.
Okay.
I had these in the room I'm speaking into you now,
Go on.
which is now part of my office, but in those days was a spare room with 2 single beds with those icky poplin bedspreads, where they have little tufts in a pattern. It's like a piece of cloth as a bedspread with little tufts here and there, like so many little tumbleweeds, known as poplin. Okay, well, I ruined one set doing the maps for Forgotten Realms Adventures, that tome you held up earlier.
Mhm.
I did those maps in 2 weeks.
The city maps.
And I was commuting 100 miles to work. Yeah, all the city maps.
Mhm.
Every single city map. With a Staedtler pen drawing tiny little square boxes. Yeah, all of those. And that took me 2 weeks, which is probably why I needed glasses. And and then along came the Menzo box set. And I ruined the other bedspread. Because I was drawing it on 17 by 35 sheets of paper, which were plastic coated on the reverse side. And I thought, oh, good, this will protect the bedspread. I don't have to worry. Little did I know. And you see, the thing is, when you're drawing stalagmites, you can draw them by hand, or you can try and save time, shove a clipboard underneath it, get out one of those templates that has little round holes of different sizes in it, for your geometry class in school, and do stalagmites at top speed in little clusters to fill in all the areas in Menzo in a heck of a hurry. So I did that, and that went the other bedspread. So there you go. I think that's my favorite story because I don't have to name any names. I don't have to throw any people under the bus. There were hilarious, colorful stories about last-minute rescues for products and writing an entire product in a weekend because something had gone wrong, or the ever popular Dragon editorial thing. See this piece of art, Ed? Yeah, I can just see it when I peer into the email. Could you possibly send a slightly larger JPEG? Oh, okay, we'll send you a larger JPEG in a couple hours, but you better start writing now because we need the text that goes with that by Thursday. It's Wednesday night. Yes, that's what I said, by Thursday. We know you can do it. There was lots of that.
Only that we didn't do that.
When you think of these great class...
tell me the games department didn't do that to you.
A lot of this...
Yeah.
No, it was mainly books and it was mainly periodicals.
Just checking. Okay.
Games department... no, Games department did the other thing. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre thing. The products that went away.
Yeah.
You see, they would.
That's true.
Everybody would do their dream products, and there'd be this sort of the first version of the catalog every year would have everybody's dream products in it, and then upper management would meet and decide we only have this much budget, this much press time, and this much paper. We can't do all of these things, and it became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Because they would put products up against the wall and shoot them, and because of the time of year when this generally happened. You put the two of those together, and you put designers who understand cultural references, and bing! And year after year, products would fall off the end.
Right.
The Elves of Evermeet, was it?
That got pushed back.
Fell off the end, I think, 3 years in a row.
3 years, I think
3
it was.
years in a row.
And actually,
Yeah.
I was a participant in that because since I was one of the only people to know how to use PageMaker on a Macintosh, Jim Ward and I would retreat to the corner where we had a Mac 2, and we'd start moving things around on the schedule. And this is what caused the massacre often, was the case of we can't have 4 boxes all releasing in July. We have to, spread it out. And so that created a lot of that. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to move it back. We're going to do this. We're going to move this one back. And some of them moved back to Oblivion, and some of them moved back. Elves of Evermeet eventually saw the light of day. So,
Jeff, you touched on it briefly.
We had more eyes bigger than our stomachs, I guess.
You mentioned it briefly. I wanted to ask you about the Forgotten Realms comic book. How did that come about? How much influence did DC have on it versus how much influence did you guys at TSR have on it? And what was the general? I guess my question is: was that meant to help promote D&D or help promote DC or both? What's the story behind that comic?
It's a both sort of thing, but it was a license to DC. I don't know how we ended up with it. I think in part, somebody reminded me that I had also designed a Marvel superheroes game based on Marvel comics, and I think that took us into the world of with other comic book companies, and DC was aware of us, And do you want to do a license? We'd love to do a license. And we started talking about it. The first books were things like AD&D, which was set in the Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, and one called Gamma Marauders, which was a Gamma World kind of spin-off with giant kaiju, creatures, like a giant hamster and everything. It was kind of fun, and they basically did some comics based on those. And the AD&D book did very well. Mike Fleischer did the first 4 issues. Oh gosh, I can't remember who the second one and then carried. I auditioned for 4 issues, and the issues 9 through 12 were my issues. And on the basis of that, they hired me as a freelance author to basically write the new Forgotten Realms series. So we took a character out of the AD&D line, Agravar, and we basically set that in the Forgotten Realms comic. And that was like a great opportunity, and it worked out very well because I would show all the strips to Jim Ward, our boss, before I sent them out. So the scripts came pre-approved, so there was much less of a chance of sending something back and TSR saying, "Oh, we don't like this." So that had a great advantage as far as DC was concerned, and we got to talk about bits of the realms, and we got to talk about areas that brought in a character that we had. My wife and I had created, Alias of Westgate, from our Azure Bonds novel, and we ran over what the Elven gods were doing during the time of troubles, and so it gave us a lot of chances to explore the realms as we went forward. So, and we went like 25 issues.
Did this guy here have anything to do with it?
Hanging on the wall.
Did Ed have any input into that comic book?
I don't think I sent you anything for approval, did I?
Nope. I appear in it.
Yes,
Elminster. Doom issue at the end. Mm-hmm. No, but I appear in it driving a forklift.
Yes. There's
the last
issue 24. Everybody runs the realms.
Show up early on.
Yes.
Issue 24. Everyone wants to rule the realms. This was a behind the scenes at the realms that had a huge amount of in-jokes in it, including Elminster lecturing me and James Louder on Mulholland pottery and the difference between the 13th and 14th dynasties, But yes, Ed was there with the forklift with all of his notes. So
I wanted to ask you. My question for you. My question for you would be: was Dwalimar Omen a stand-in for Elminster, because you couldn't use Elminster? Was there maybe some politics behind using one of the main NPCs in that way? No?
No, because later on we have them drinking together. Omen was a original character for the comic, the head of the Realm's Master. But he was just an original character we created. Rags Morales was the artist for those early issues, like about the first 16, 20, and he did a fantastic job. I really liked Omen's look. I loved all the characters, so I thought he did just great.
There's no point in doing new Realms products if you don't add something to the setting. So we're always adding new characters, new spells, new magic items, new places, new little wrinkles, because and that's the thing. Every new design team that gets on the Realms, it's like being handed the keys to the vet. You want to drive the car. You want your chance to take it for a spin. So why not? That's the fun of this. So we're always adding stuff.
So, Jeff, I wanted to ask you something not Realms related, because for those of you who may not know your background, maybe some new fans of D&D, you were involved in a ton of products for D&D, and I'm going to put a graphic up here. You won't be able to see it, but the viewers will. Of a lot of your work, you wrote the Manual of the Planes first edition for AD&D. You wrote the Al-Qadim setting for D&D. Yes. You wrote Spelljammer. You wrote the Marvel Face Rip game. You wrote a few novels. One of these games that's making sort of a comeback, it's become a meme on Twitter almost, is Spelljammer. people seem to have a real fondness for Spelljammer.
Oh yes.
and this sort of Victorian space adventures wrapped around a D&D setting.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question to you is regarding Spelljammer. What were you guys smoking in Lake Geneva back then? And can I have some of that?
Spelljammer confirmed.
Yes. I think that Watsy just taunts people with that, you know.
Yeah.
People always ask that question about Manual of the Planes too, and the answer is no, really, I'm just that crazy. Spelljammer came out of a pitch meeting. We all went to lunch at a local
Brownie shop
bar restaurant called Augie's in Lake Geneva. And this was Jim Ward was in charge. Warren Spector was his second in command. And we were all pitching ideas, and I pitched an idea of you've got a guy in full armor, you know, a fighter. He's standing on the deck of a ship in space, and he's not floating off, and he can breathe, and basically we have space adventures. And Jim loved that idea, and that started us down the path that became Spelljammer. And so it really did come out of the aether as far as, and it was interesting because one thing I always bothered me was, you know, people would say, "Oh, no, D&D, that's your generic fantasy stuff." So we're saying, "Hey, we're giving you space, and we're giving you crystal spheres, and we're giving you all sorts of stuff." And now, yeah, D&D in space is now just your standard fantasy as well. So okay, fine. We push the borders back, and that's where the borders are. So, but it was a great little setting, and I love. There's the new Baldur's Gate that's coming out as a computer game, and the opening cinematic for that has a nautiloid that basically is flying and gets Yankee on red dragons. Just, you know, okay, this is cool stuff, you know.
Well, there's some of the 5th edition adventures actually have little Easter eggs to Spelljammer sprinkled throughout them. So Spelljammer is very much still a thing in the fiction.
The GIF shows up.
Yeah.
And I think they basically, you know, make reference to it every so often. I don't know if they're ever going to do a Spelljammer setting or a hardback. No one talks to me. But, you know, but every time they do, the fandom basically says, "Ooh, Spelljammer!"
They've been confirming Spelljammer for the past 6 years.
Spelljammer confirmed!
Yes.
Spelljammer confirmed.
I know for the past 6 years. I believe Mike Merles just likes winding them up. So,
what was your favorite D&D product to work on? If you had to pick one, you have to pick one book.
I really liked Al-Qadim.
Al-Qadim.
I would say Al-Qadim was excellent. Arabian Adventures. Andrea Hayday was my editor and also wrote a section of that. And I thought that it was just a really perfect change of channels for Dungeons and Dragons. Again, pushing the borders back and basically making it true to a different culture that's not Western European. So, you know, I would go with that.
Ed?
I'm going to say, Ed, what's your favorite?
I have 3 different answers because there are 3 different things. The favorite one in terms of what we have in the product is the 3rd edition baseline product, because we managed to try to do the same thing that Steve did with D&D. Mm-hmm. You know, cram the quart into the pint pot. Right. So we managed to get the most coverage into it.
You also,
the one that had the most fun content from...
Sorry to interrupt you. You also managed to cram the map of the Forgotten Realms into a different size paper, and you actually had to shrink the continent to make it fit this map.
Yes.
That's a little bit of an Easter egg some people don't know.
Yes. Actually, at one point, Richard Baker, you know, who did design work on that, basically brought the Realms map to me in shreds and said, "What do you think?" It's interesting, you know, because that's what we're gonna do. So, okay, fine. That got a lot of pushback. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that was your favorite. The one you had the most fun on.
I think the one I had the most fun on, personally, would probably be Seven Sisters or Code of the Harpers, because I got to delve into a lot of the lore. Mm-hmm. The one that I had the most fun with the end product, but it was doing it at frantic speed, was the Forgotten Realms Adventures tome.
Right.
And it's the most fun of the end product because we covered stuff that I thought was burningly essential, like city maps to bring all those cities to life. Okay, now they're no longer places you have to detour around on the map because we haven't detailed them for the Dungeon Master. You can go anywhere. And
What I
the one I
liked
think that
about
was the most
that.
frustrating.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say the one that was always the most frustrating was the Volos guides and Waterdeep because I had to leave so much out. Word count was never my friend.
Yes.
And mouse type. And you better tell the mouse type story because
FR1, the first module that we were writing, source book that we were writing, was on Waterdeep and the North. And we basically had said so much about Waterdeep, we had like 2 pages for the North. And then we wanted to add all the guilds, so we shrunk all the type into this little tiny mouse type for all the guild stuff, and that was like the last page of it. Yeah. Oh boy! But one thing I liked about Forgotten Realms Adventures was those cities because I basically worked out a 2-page spread. The idea of basically just have both pages facing, that's something that's sort of a holy grail type thing as far as game designers were concerned. We wanted to have everything on 2 pages, and we've tried it a number of times, and here it worked because we basically had all the information that hopefully you need. Where do you go? Where do you stay? Who's in charge? Who's really in charge? And in one nice little place as well. The most frustrating project for me, and you were not a part of this, was the Curse of the Azure Bonds adventure. Azure Bonds was a novel my wife and I wrote. We took it and we adapted its setting and some of the characters for an SSI computer game, Gold Box. And we were going to release a adventure, 128 pages, for that as well. And I was behind with other projects, and so a number of friends, we all had to dogpile on it. And I'm writing during the day and reviewing at night, and just getting everything together in one place in order to basically make the turnover. And that's happened every so often to every designer I know, and that's where it happened to me. So you'll see if you look at the Curse of the Azure Bonds credits, you'll notice there's a lot of names in there. So,
all right. So there's a lot of questions in the chat. I'm gonna take the last few minutes of the show and go through them and see what you guys can say. All right. So here we go. I'm gonna read them verbatim. S. Martin is listed as both the editor and one of the authors of the original AD&D Forgotten Realms campaign set alongside Jeff and Ed. How does she shape and influence the Forgotten Realms in that book? Like, what parts did she write? Anybody want to take that?
Go ahead. Oh, you're going to give it to me?
Karen, yeah.
Karen S. Boomgarden. Currently, Karen Conlon. She has her own website. She's still doing freelance editing. But she was, so responsible for keeping my sanity when we were basically putting all that together, because it was a box set with more text than we had done before and getting everything correct. And I think this is why our editors are the secret heroes of the early TSR era when we're putting out all this one, and Karen is at the top.
Ed, here's a question for you.
The best way to view an editor is to think that you've got 2 crazy idea guys saying, "Oh, we got to have this in the box. We got to have this in the box," and the editor makes the trains run on time and not run into each other.
He was the grown-up in the room. Yeah.
So that'll lead me to this question that somebody had in the chat. What darlings from those original texts did you have to leave out and have yet to make it into the realm? So maybe they were edited out.
What?
I had to say kill your darlings.
Yeah, like any. Any favorites that just haven't made it in yet because of whatever reason?
Oh, there's tons of stuff from the realms that hasn't made it into the published realms, but not a lot of stuff from the original turnover packages. The problem there was everything was. They did not want a new product line to be a bottleneck of slowly squeezed out products. Right. They wanted to have a world that they were standing behind and bringing a lot of stuff out. So there was no time to say, oh, we'll get to that in, it's like, no, what do we got? Okay, we have to turn this into a product. Okay, what else can we spin off? What else can we develop in a hurry so that there is a product line here? So stuff that there was a time at which both Jeff and Karen said, okay, no more. We got what we need for that. We'll just chop all these other bits off and do other products from them.
Right.
So therefore, there was not stuff left out from what I originally turned over. They stopped me turning over stuff.
Did they ever publish the collective nouns for creatures?
No,
what
the
you
terms
call
of entry, no.
Yeah, what you call a group of ropers. Did that ever show up in any product?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
And there were some monsters, and
Yeah.
the recipes. They thought the recipes offended against the code of conduct, dragon soup and so on, because you had intelligent creatures
Sentient
being
creatures,
cooked.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, well, in real life you do this all the time, so never mind. No, and the one thing that did offend against the code of conduct and got taken out all the way across, anything to do with human blood. Like human blood as a material component for a spell.
Right.
There was a bowl of blood magic item. There was things you could do with blood using sword magic. If you had a magic sword and you managed to draw blood with it, there was a spell you could cast. All of that went away because it was using human blood.
Right.
And it was presumably that to stop somebody in real life doing something tragic.
What we had had a code of conduct that was the comics code of the era, and that created all sort of like scratched off comics and wrote in games, and so that created all sorts of challenges that we would have. But yes, but primarily it was because we're trying to move it into a mass market and be more accommodating for it. But yes,
what happened to the idea? I know that the original idea was sort of this concept that the realms were forgotten, but once upon a time we were all connected through these portals and these doors and whatnot, and that over time sort of faded away into not really being kind of touched on too much. Am I right there that it kind of sort of faded away into the background? It wasn't really a main part of the realms as the game developed. Why was that?
you mean in fact we don't have people visiting from our world into the realms?
Well, I know we had the Wizards 3 columns in Dragon, and that's something that they did for fun in Dragon Magazine. But I mean, like, there was this idea...
Those were powerful wizards, so,
But there was this idea that there were these portals that connected everybody, and that sort of just, like, kind of went away. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if maybe I'm wrong about that, but just that's kind of the feeling I got.
Okay, I was never on staff at TSR, so this is me reading the tea leaves from on afar. I think a little bit of it was the let's not have any steam tunnels stuff that was happening in, and let's just not go there. And the second thing was Portal Fantasy can be its own game setting. And sure enough, Planescape or whatever. But I mean, so therefore, and there was an attempt early on to separate the realms worlds, the TSR worlds. For instance, we didn't publish much of my heraldry in the realms because heraldry was Greyhawk.
Right. We
didn't have riders of aerial beast with lances in the realms, even though I had them in the realms in the Zentrim were riding foul wings, and it was like, no, that's Dragonlance. So let's differentiate the worlds, and so therefore, I think the Portal Fantasy, which was in my Gates article back in Dragon 37, and I was exploring all that, the idea, and then the very first fantasy novels are William Morris, because he sort of originates the novel format, and one of them is The Wood Between the Worlds, which is a portal fantasy. So it's been around since the beginning. But I think that they de-emphasized that for those dual reasons.
I'm going to say not so much for the dual reasons. I don't remember us ever, saying, we can't have them riding foul wings because of Dragonlance. And I believe we did put some heraldry into, was it in the first or second edition.
Forgotten
version.
Realms Adventures.
Yeah, Forgotten Realms was where we showed like. But you're right about Greyhawk. Basically the original Greyhawk portfolio showing all of the heraldry of all of the different nations of Greyhawk. So, and plus the fact one difference between Greyhawk and Realms was Greyhawk had more borders. Realms, we've got, Shadowdale, we've got Cormyr, and over here we've got Waterdeep, and we've got this sort of nebulous spot with some city-states in it along the main road between them, and that's about it. So it's not like a world where you see everything has been claimed.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let me see what other questions we have. You know that there's a Forgotten Realms Magic the Gathering card set coming out. And I'm not a Magic the Gathering player.
Yes.
I don't really know much about it. But the buzz seems to be that Elminster did not make it onto the card set. What's up with that?
He's not listed on the spoilers. Actually, yesterday I went looking up the spoiler list, and the Big E did not make it. So Mordenkainen made it. Mordenkainen made it.
Mordenkainen made it. Well, I presume Elminster wouldn't sit still for the photo op.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, the artist has to paint him, and he probably says, "I do have better things to do than watch paint dry."
All right, I'm getting close to wrapping up. I'm getting close to wrapping up, and
looking behind the scenes. Okay.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Okay, looking behind the scenes, I looked. A lot of it are some characters and figures and situations which have appeared recently in D&D products, like Xanathar is on the list. Volo is on the list. He is Volo, Guide to Monsters. So basically, we're seeing some of the ones that are more recent in nature, as opposed to some of the older guard.
So here's a question. I have two of the designers of, Jeff, I consider you one of the designers of the Forgotten Realms, at least the classic realms as much as Ed. Here's a question for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are tasked with producing a futuristic version of the Forgotten Realms. Where is Faerun in 1,500 years?
I always said the mindset of the realms wasn't medieval so much as it was early industrial. In other words, we have magic that is doing a lot of things. I always said that's doing a lot of things that we would, communication, transportation, etc. Even something as simple as a light spell can transform a society. One of the pieces that I think would change everything is, and Ed, you can give voice in on this as well, is being able to mass produce magical books, a magical printing press. And that would happen over the next 1,500 years, and that would transform it. I would say the world would look a lot more like Aurua, which is a highly magical nation down to the south. So, what do you think?
Because you've got Mystra pushing that. Mm-hmm. Mystra is pushing that as her goal, a magically literate populace. And to have a magically literate populace, they have to be literate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to change everything. It's going to be very much an equalizer.
True.
In terms of the lower class and the middle class. It's going to become a society where the people at the bottom have more and participate more, and the people at the top can't oppress as much.
Do you think we'll still have kings?
Anybody can push back. Think
the Obarskir line's still in business?
Have kings I would think we would, but I think they'd be more like a British constitutional monarchy. The king or queen is a figurehead. There's a ruling council.
Mm-hmm.
Things are decided, and then the monarch puts the trappings on it, the pomp and circumstance.
And we have that a bit in Waterdeep
the monarch
already.
knights you. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine a Waterdeep filled with skyscrapers?
It already is, from their point of view.
Yeah.
and you already have buildings in Waterdeep that have a flying buttress, flying bridge to another tall building.
Mm-hmm.
So they can both go higher without falling down. So, assuming you don't have any major cataclysms, or the dragon wards don't fail, and a dragon decides it's going to have fun knocking down buildings in an afternoon, I would say it's just going to keep going up and up and up, because the real estate is getting more and more valuable, and people don't want to go to the expense of building at great expense outside, so you have a longer travel time when you can build up where you already are. Same thing that happens in our real world.
So we see Waterdeep is more of a Manhattan.
Yeah, density's going up.
Mm-hmm.
In places that have good natural solid ground to build on, and places that have good harbors and or water supplies, or both. You're not going to have the Brazilias of this world where they artificially decide we're going to put a huge city here in the middle of nowhere, and there's not a particularly compelling reason to supply it except political decision. I don't think we're going to reach that point. I think they're going to develop what they have already. And places that don't have a logical development, like Baldur's Gate is expanding because more and more people want to be there.
Right.
But we're now moving into substandard land. So, and therefore you're not going to get resistance from people who are farming that land because it's not good farmland, that sort of thing. And climate's going to have, the question then comes, that do we have any major climate shift? Does that affect things? Because people like 10 Towns are hanging on. If it gets really colder or warms up a lot, it's going to change things.
Well, we also
in
have
that
magic
corner of
and
the world.
control weather as a spell. So that therefore, we can actually do the magical equivalent of, say, the Thames floodgates that basically, at the mouths of the Thames, basically protect it from storm surges. We can basically create that magically, either through golems that can, basically move things, but also through spells. I can see us creating spell towers that basically will guarantee a temperate environment, even, around. Now that becomes a question of how it's owned, who can afford it, that sort of thing.
There we go. Mm-hmm. And that's where your next wars are.
Yeah.
It's warring weather control spells. And
because if you're setting something out, you may if you set that up in Cormyr, you may be screwing up what's going across the Sea of Dragons. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is we do this all the time. So
conflict will always be with us. It's always dynamic. It never ends.
All right, so
there's always going to be conflicts, and there's always going to be change.
I promised you I wouldn't take up too much of your time. This is going to be my last thing, and I have to ask only because, well, it's not really a question, but I have to mention it because I have both of you here, and I'm a huge nerd, and I'm going to geek out for a moment. My current 5th edition campaign is a direct sequel to the comic book. The party is the crew of the Realms Master. The crew is the new. The party is the new crew of the Realms Master, and Dwalimar Omen lives inside the Astrolab of Nimbrel as a disembodied soul, and he is still on his quest to gather the most dangerous artifacts in the Forgotten Realms. The Golem Minder is still on the ship, watching over the Astrolab. She doesn't move. She doesn't speak. She's just sort of an entity looming over the Astrolab, making sure that Dwalimar is safe. My question to you, Jeff, is, in the current era of the Forgotten Realms, where would a guy like Foxy the Halfling be? If I want to introduce him into my game, where could I find him?
I have always I joked with Ed about how a lot of the characters from the early realms have managed to survive into the current realms.
They all have,
and Dragonbait made a recurrence. And then it's just, I would say Foxy at this point would probably have his own setup. I say he has a large family.
Okay.
He basically he's made it. He's semi-retired. He's basically the family patriarch, and but he just feels that whole day-to-day dealing with his family getting under his nerves, and this would be an opportunity for him to go out for one last hurrah, for one last great adventure. That's just what I would throw out. The other option is taking into account the time thing, is it could be his descendants. There could be, a group of Cardlucks, of which Foxalon is held as the family hero, because he went off and did all this. So both of those are options.
One of my players actually has a halfling book of jokes that belonged to Foxy that he found on the ship, on a crate or something, that he has as a personal item. As a little tie back to the comic book. But yeah, so I just wanted to
have a
mention
question for you.
What's
Where
that?
is the Moon Penguin of Boof in your campaign?
I haven't.
You was asking about the Moon Penguin of Boof.
That's from one of the AD&D comic books, correct? That's not from the Forgotten Realms comic book.
It's from an annual, but it was a team up. It was a team up between the Forgotten Realms team and the AD&D team.
The dwarf and the centaur from the AD&D comics and the Forgotten Realms team. I have not introduced it to my campaign, but now I'm going to look into it and do it.
It was the Forgotten Realms team and the Moon Penguin of Boo. Yes.
I think with the Moon Penguin, I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight.
The last time it was in Salune's hands, so
it might still be there.
Well, thank you for having us. It's been really good.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you.
I had a great time. I wish I could talk, another 2 hours, but I'm going to be respectful of your times, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. And everybody watching, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to try to do this often, and I can't promise you that I'm going to do this weekly, but I'm going to try to do this as often as I can. Bring someone on, hopefully, as great as my two first guests tonight that made this debut a fantastic show. So again, thank you guys. Thank you to our viewers, and stand by for the next show. We'll see. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.